Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Blissful Life Podcast, soon to be the Self-Care Oasis podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Gregory, and today our guest is Brandi Hudson. She is going to teach us a bit about how to use emotional intelligence to help you get through life without burnout. Welcome, Brandi. Thank you so much for being a part of our show today.
Oh, Samantha, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Me too. Of course, I did not do like a here's who Brandy is and all your accolades and all the things because I really wanted to hear from your mouth. And I'd like the audience also to hear from you as well. So, who you are, what got you into this work, and a little bit about your backstory and how you've transformed burnout into bliss for yourself.
Oh, yes, thank you so much. So, my story, like all of our stories, is pretty long, but I'm going to give you the truncated version. I was born and raised in Detroit. I was born to teenage parents who poured everything into me so that I could have this great, big, beautiful life that I have now. And I'm very grateful for that. One thing they were really focused on in terms of ensuring that I had a great life was really success. So like we prioritize success in kind of like every metric over all else. So it was like getting good grades, going to the best schools, being the star of the teams, being on all the, clubs and organizations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even to the fact, like when I graduated, my dad was like, you need to be a director by this age, a VP by this age, work at a company and make this amount of money. So it was always very directed, right? And I think for me, Samantha, I woke up one day and I was like, okay, I have checked all of these boxes, like every single one of them. I made my parents proud. They always said that. You never gave us any trouble and you made us proud. So
Right.
I checked the boxes, but I realized that I just wasn't as happy as I wanted to be. And that success had come at a cost and it felt like a burden, right? And there had been a lot of friction along the way. So I took a step back and I thought for myself, if I had these skills to have achieved so much success across many different facets of life as an athlete, like in my relationship and in my career, then I could probably use those skills to feel much more peaceful. And so with that recognition, I embarked on a journey of how to love myself deeply, to have this internal sense of peace and joy. And what I found is that while it is not true that money will make you happy, it is true that happiness is directly correlated with success. If we could shift that on its axis for myself, and now I partner with people to do that, we could have an entire community, especially of Black women who have achieved a ton of success, which we have, but who also feel this profound sense of peace that we deserve more than I think we realize. And so the
Absolutely.
work that I do is helping people build a life that feels as good as it looks.
I love that. That's so profound, so true, so necessary, so needed because, like you said, we have the receipts. We are multi-degreed, me being one. And if we're looking at statistics, if we're looking at all the data, like you just said, no one can say that we are innately failures. We have all the know-how, the intellect to do all the things. But like you said, the piece is not necessarily missing because we're wearing these capes, we're wearing these masks, we're playing by someone else's script.
Yeah.
And that is very painful when you look back over and you're like, wow, was it really for me?
Yeah.
Who was it for?
Yeah, but I want us to also have grace with ourselves because we are really just doing what we were taught.
Yes.
And we have been taught this generation after generation. And it originally came from this place of self preservation and
Mhm.
preservation of us as a people. I love to ensure that we give ourselves grace and also say that we're in a new time
Yes.
and that we can change the paradigm, and that if we teach ourselves and
Mhm.
then our children to focus on different things, that we can have these same level of outcomes
Mhm.
around this idea of being at peace, leaning into joy,
Yes,
etc.
I love that. Leaning into joy. When the book came out, Lean In, I was like, yeah, that sounds good, but it does lead to burnout because we're so busy living by someone else's script, someone else's idea of what success looks like. You are teaching people the self-care piece, the emotional intelligence piece. So I would love to know, like, even what does that even mean? I know what emotional intelligence is, and I know what burnout is. But
Yes.
how do you put those things together to help what we call in tech world mitigate this issue of burnouts so that we're thriving and so we do find ourselves living a lifestyle of self-care and peace?
Yeah. So I created a framework that I call BASE because I think it's foundational to living the life that you deserve. And it really focuses on what most people call soft skills. I believe the soft
Mhm.
skills are actually 80% of it, but we spent 80% of our time focused on the hard skills. What I know for sure is if we can really manage these soft skills, we're going to be excellent at change management, time management, and productivity because all of those things can fall into place when our nervous system is regulated, when we have coherence in our body. The reason those things get off kilter is because we're really burning the candle at both ends. These soft skills scaffold us when we're working in corporate America, running our own business or whatever we're doing. The B in base is around what beliefs do you have? We can have beliefs like no one is going to support us in the workplace. There's a glass ceiling in the workplace, that there are, money doesn't grow on trees. Oh, there's more successful Black women than Black men in the world. So how am I going to find a spouse? Now, all of these things, regardless if they're true, truth is also about perspective, but they're not helpful.
Hmm.
They're not helpful. Like, so if we shift the lens through which we're looking, we draw more things to us that we're
Hmm.
actually seeking versus drawing things to us that we are looking to avoid, right? So that's B, it's about our beliefs. The A is alignment. We have to be in this knowing that
Hmm.
our success is inevitable. We have to be aligned with what we're seeking in advance of getting it.
Hmm.
There is a way for achievement, which probably most of us went through, where it feels like we're pushing a boulder up a mountain. But this alternate way is just to sit in your knowing, to
Hmm.
realize that your success is inevitable. When you're in that space, you really are able to close the gap much more quickly, shrink the timeline from when you want to achieve a goal to when you actually achieve a goal. And then the S is self-awareness. Like, how do you think about how you contribute to your own success or lack of success, how you contribute to how much friction you're having in your life? And the more we can take ownership of our path, the more we're able to move to this higher plane, which is just going to feel much better for ourselves. The more we're in this place of blame, it's just going to be trickier and trickier. So I tell people we take personal accountability for ourselves, not for other
Hmm.
people, right?
Hmm.
And then the E is that emotional resilience. So we have kind of trauma in our history as Black Americans, and then we have either stress or trauma in our lives. You can't get through this human experience without it. But the gift is to keep the wisdom of all
Hmm.
of those experiences and release the dense emotions. When we're able to do that and live in this present moment, with that wisdom, we create this big, beautiful life.
Love that. And I want to almost like break down every part of base that you just mentioned because it's so true how it does start with our belief system. I know for me, when I was deciding to heal trauma, when I was deciding to elevate my life, upgrade my life, I knew that I had to start with foundational beliefs. I had to literally just sweep everything off the table and just I examined everything and I was like, do I really want to keep this? Is this really serving me? Am I really able to sustain this belief? Especially if I want to go to this next level, if I want to create this new life, we're scared because that's wrapped up in our identity.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about how our beliefs are so intricately connected to our identity and just one or two ways that we can release those beliefs that don't serve us, even though it feels a little scary.
Yeah. I think that the first way that I teach people to release their beliefs, I'm starting at the end, but I'll go back to the first part of the question, really like unpack it. Because
Mhm.
like so many of these beliefs we just haven't examined.
Right.
I mean, half the time I say to people, like, so what I heard you say is, and they're like, well, I didn't mean that. I'm like, no, but you
Mhm.
did, right? So I think
Mhm.
when we say it out loud, or we have someone like you or me or a friend just hold space for us and
Mhm.
really challenge ourselves and
Right.
say, oh, why To your point, it isn't in service to my own greatest good, right? The change that I'm inviting people to make isn't to absolve any bad actor. It's
Right.
so that we can live this great, big, beautiful life. I think the first step is just examining what you believe. Ask yourself, why do I believe this?
Mhm.
Who taught me this? Where
Mhm.
did it come from? What about it is in service to my future state? Right? When you start to ask those questions, you very quickly will let it go because you're
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, I just believe this because grandma said it, great grandpa said it. It's passed down. And so much of what we know to be true is just because someone told us. And then I think, in terms of it being part of our identity, like our identities are shaped in so many ways, right? We have these cultural identities, like we're Americans, we are women, we are mothers, we are children, and they all have these norms associated with them that we put on, like blankets and cape and backpacks, and we just carry them with us. And we believe it is who we are, right? Like we think that voice in our head is us, but that isn't us.
Not at all.
And so when you take a step back and you're like, oh, like I think that what makes Brandy a Black woman are all these things, and
Mhm.
what makes Brandy successful are all these things. And then we don't want to let them go because it's like our blankie. And I think it's actually more challenging for really successful people
Mhm.
to let go of their identities because they think if I let go, the downside feels further than the potential upside. But
Mhm.
that's the trick society plays on us with this scarcity mentality, right? Like that there's not this overflowing amount of joy that's actually on the other side. And we're not as far along as we believe we are, no matter how many degrees, how much money we've
Mhm.
made, where we live. And so we have to remind ourselves that there's an even better life available to us.
Absolutely. I don't know, it's trusting yourself that if you can release those things that don't serve you, you will get to that better, big, beautiful life as you calling it. And I love that, by the way, because the belief is that we don't deserve that or we have to work hard for it.
Yes.
And that keeps us stuck in
It,
this phase of churn. It's almost like we're churning because we're trying to figure out how do I get to that place, but then also how do I hold on to this thing that I've identified with for most of my life and built my identity from the degrees I have to the person I've dated and married to the, all the things you built it on those belief systems that don't serve you. And like you said, we're afraid that it's just going to fall apart and that we're going to have to start all over again.
yeah. I tell people, which almost 100% resonates with everyone I've said it to, if your life could be this great, as unhappy as you are,
Mm.
imagine how amazing it will be when you let go of everything that doesn't serve you and you're in your most joyous state. It's irrational to believe that it wouldn't be better on the other side. But
Mhm.
we never even ask ourselves that question. We don't explore that as a possibility because
Mhm.
we think this is just how it has to be, but it
Yes,
doesn't.
right.
It's so much better.
Absolutely. I know we haven't really talked about how this is connected to burnout. The beliefs that we hold on to and that we churn in, that also adds to or causes us to go into burnout because
Yeah.
our foundation is unstable and our
Yeah.
beliefs are misaligned. This causes us to burn out because we're trying to figure it all out, but we're trying to stay on top of things, but we're trying to
Yeah.
perform and do all the
Yeah.
things. So, like, even that detrimental to the big, beautiful life we're trying to build.
I tell people that burnout is because you don't yet realize that there is a repeatable process for you. Once we implement this process, we up-level our beliefs, we're in alignment with what we're seeking, we have self-awareness when we're off track, and we are able to alchemize and get right back on track. We release all of our dense emotions. We create a process where our success is inevitable, and we know that in our soul. The burnout dissipates because the burnout comes from the anxiety and worry about being able to maintain this life, this facade, this level of output. And once we can ease our minds and be at peace, then we don't have that burnout because we have this repeatable process, because we built this life that feels as good as it looks. And we know that it is inevitably connected to who we are. Happiness is our birthright. Our identity is that we were put here on this planet to be in the highest states of joy. All of the dense emotions, burnout, anxiety, worry, fear, anger, shame, all of those emotions serve one purpose and one purpose only: to tell us that we're off track.
Yeah.
It's just like pain. If you were in pain, you would go to the doctor. We have taught ourselves as a society and as a culture that those dense emotions are normal. We just pack them up and take them with us. But their purpose is to tell us you're disconnected, you're off track. You have to shift something. There is something meant to change. And when you make that shift, when you make that change, when you learn that lesson, and then you get back on track and you get back to your rightful place of joy, happiness, love, and peace.
Yeah, I love, which is like mirror opposites to these dense emotions that we carry around. But oftentimes we don't allow, or we don't even know we can allow the opposites of the dense emotions, the joy and love and peace, because either we haven't seen it in our field of experience through
Yeah.
people that we've been connected to our entire lives. It's almost like a default setting for everybody to be struggling and miserable, churning over and over again. Even culturally, that's how we've been programmed. We got to work hard, twice as hard to get half as, all those narratives and beliefs, not realizing or believing that that's out of alignment with the life that we want to live, the life that we want to have. Exactly. The alignment piece and how misaligned we are from childhood. The challenge it is to get into alignment, even figure out, well, what is in alignment? What is it that will bring me into alignment with this new belief system that I want to adopt? I guess that's
Yeah.
the better
Because if
word.
you don't see anyone living it, it is pretty tricky to
Yeah.
just like wake up and be like, oh, I'm going to be different. Well, different how?
Mhm.
There's a billion differences, but if you haven't seen the one that you know in your soul you're meant to align to, it's not always just like wake up and make that change. We have to give ourselves permission to live this
Mhm.
life that we aspire to, because we almost don't think we deserve it. Our
Right.
soul knows, but we don't
Mhm.
believe we do. And society really recognizes hard work. It
Mhm.
recognizes tragedy and defeat. It hierarchies. It puts it up on a pedestal. That rags to riches story. All those things that I asked someone the other day, why is everyone attracted to the hero journey? Everybody loves it. Everybody loves, like, oh, I fell out of favor and I want it back. Like, people are just attracted to that story. And I think we have to ask ourselves why. Like, how did we get here where we have over indexed for pain and suffering over what I believe is our birthright, this place of happiness? And so I think if we look through this lens of self-love, self-acceptance, and self-worth, if we keep those three things front and center, then we always have this guide of where we're trying to get to.
I think another part of the alignment or misalignment that
Yeah.
we often struggle with is the misalignment with our energies as a feminine versus masculine. Been taught that the masculine way is how to succeed. This is what success looks like. This is what you should be doing. You should be striving. You should be pushing. You should be, all the things that
Yeah.
men do. women have taken on as the standard for what success is. And that's out of alignment with our own energy
Yeah.
and causes burnout.
And I think about success specifically from a career perspective as being both the masculine and feminine.
Mhm,
Lots of men are off track by over indexing. The masculine part of it is this idea of setting a goal, having a
mhm,
purpose, being consistent with our work, showing up. But the feminine part of success is then realizing that you will be in receipt of
mhm,
all that you prepared for, right? It's like
mhm,
it comes full circle and it's both
mhm,
and, right? Because
mhm.
you will not manifest, co-create, reach your goal, whatever you want to call it. You will not do it just by sitting around thinking about it and hoping it shows up. You do
Right.
need to take this inspired action,
Yeah.
right? And so we want people to clear their minds, be able to hear the voice of God, their higher self,
Mhm,
universal source energy, whatever you connect with, you want to hear that voice very clearly so you can
mhm,
take action. But then the knowing is that feminine part, that
mhm.
like knowing and being in receipt and not having to push. I remember when I was buying my house, my realtor was like, well, you need to call the bank. You have to call the bank. And I said, well, I'm not going to call the bank because the house is meant for me. And he was like, girl, you are crazy. You need to call the bank. And I was like, I'm just not going to do it, Neil. And he was like, wait, what? And I was like, I know that house is meant for me. It's all going to work out. And he was
Mhm.
like beside himself. But I think that energetically is how most people are. Like most
Right.
people are like, I have to push,
Mhm,
force, and get what I want instead of
mhm.
like, it's going to come
Allowing.
to me. I allow it, I receive it. I
Mhm.
know that it is inevitably mine.
Absolutely. I love that. And how important it is to have that balance between the masculine and feminine energies, recognizing when you are more on one side, when you're no longer in a space of receiving and allowing, but you're grabbing and pushing and competing with other people versus collaborating and making it a synergistic type of
Right? Like all the world should be in this symbiotic state. We haven't seen it a lot lately, but that is
right.
how we work best. And so I think, yes, we want to, because the one thing I didn't mention that I want to mention now, we want to have self-awareness when we're off track.
Hmm.
Most important thing with self-awareness is to have grace with ourselves. There's no value in being hard on yourself after you realize you're off track. Like being like, oh, Brandy, I can't believe you did that, or ruminating
Hmm.
about a mistake. You're just compounding it. So you
Hmm.
gently release it. If you've committed a transgression to someone else, you can apologize. If you've done something you prefer to have not done, you learn the lesson and move on from this place
Hmm.
of grace. We have to learn to be gentle with ourselves. I generally find that people that are really hard to others or mean to others are really hard on themselves in public or like a driver or anything. I just send them love because I'm like, well, if you're acting like this to me, then I imagine the way you treat yourself is really,
Hmm.
really tricky. And so trying to be in this place of, but I had to learn that because the old version of me was like,
Oh,
girl,
yeah.
so we are all the things. But
Yeah.
I've learned that by having more grace with myself, I have a lot more grace with other people.
And one of my favorite things to tell people is have, extend copious amounts of grace to yourself,
Oh,
because
I love that.
it is so important because we put ourselves through so much mental anguish and even physical anguish because we're so hard on ourselves. But you didn't know what you didn't know.
You do.
Oftentimes, you just didn't know what you didn't know. Once you do know, you can course correct. It's not a permanent situation.
No.
It's just grace. It's just wisdom that you receive from this experience because now you know that doesn't work for me, or that's not the best thing to do, or I want something different. I want something better. And like you said, the more grace you're able to give to yourself, the more you have for others as well.
I love that. And I love when you said earlier, you decided you wanted to change this ability to just know. Like that's actually the first step is to decide on purpose that your life is going to be different. And
Mm,
then the road opens up for you.
absolutely. And that's very powerful. That's the way that we empower ourselves to create the life that we want. Because
Yeah.
from that decision, you have to think why am I here and what do I want different? So
Mhm.
it could be big or small, just depending on the situation. But if you've been through a certain thing a number of times, it's like, you know what, this is a pattern that I don't
Yeah.
like. And then it's like, okay, I'm ready for a change. I'm ready for something different. And this is just not working for me.
Yeah. And you're
So,
ready to learn the lesson, right? Like those patterns, God is going to give you the lesson until you learn it. All of our life are patterns, right? It's like, well,
mhm,
where did this show up for you before? And people are like, oh,
right.
I don't remember. I'm like, well, I know it did. So I'll wait. Like, especially the big things because you ignored all the little happenings along the way, right? So then explode. So I tell people now, I try to listen early and often
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
the universe is trying to get my attention that it's time to make a change.
Right, absolutely. We talked a little bit about self-awareness, and I
Yeah.
think that's so important. It's one of the main cornerstones in my life that I'm really learning that I must pay attention. Just it's really about paying attention, and it is powerful to be self-aware and make those shifts and changes. The final thing is emotional resilience and building that up. One of the main things I've learned I remember specifically, I was going through some really rough times, and my immediate thing was to fall into depression, to fall into despair. And I literally Googled how to learn how to cope.
Mhm.
That was one of the main things because I did not have that example. I
Mhm.
did not know because people either blew up or they
Mhm.
shut down. And that was like the only two
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just like, but that's not healthy. That's not getting me anywhere. It's not
Yeah.
changing the situation. So talk about a little bit more about emotional resilience and like the foundation of it, because I think a lot of people just don't have a good foundation for emotional resilience.
Yeah, I will say the E in base is the heaviest lift for sure.
Yeah.
Like building that emotional resilience is tricky because it's all of these things that have happened across time in our life that we have stored are impacting our nervous system. It's why
Mhm.
we can't have peace. It's why that person pops off when somebody says something to them. It's not because you can't just be like, calm down, Brandy. Well, if I could calm down, that would be my preferred choice. I
Yeah.
have popped off because I am on edge. I am
Mhm.
living in this constant state of fight or flight, and I
Mhm.
don't even realize it. It is tricky, but I think there's a numerous ways, right, that go from like we can do it, and then there
Mhm.
are ways where you can pay people lots of money to help you through. It probably depends on how big of an issue you have to navigate. A couple of things that I think really help people calm their nervous system and disconnect from the
Mhm.
dense emotions of events that have occurred in their lives are like one, like really writing about it because we hold it in our heads and
Mhm.
ruminate and we've never released it. Writing is a release. I tell people one of the first steps you can do is, like let's say I had angered you many, many,
Mhm.
many years ago and you were holding on to it. You could write a letter that says, Dear Brandy, and write everything you ever wanted to say and be as raw and real as you could be. Then
Mhm.
I invite people to rip it or tear it. I usually don't invite people to mail it
Yeah.
because that's not very, that just persists, right? And then a next step, lots of people have heard of that step, but the next step is oftentimes to write yourself the apology you would have wanted to receive from me, right?
Mhm.
So then we write back and it's like, Dear Samantha, I didn't know any better, but I realized that my actions were so wrong, et cetera, right? Like, what would you have wanted to hear back, right? Or, you write back, I am evil and you're right. Whatever you think you needed
Mhm.
to hear in that moment, write that for yourself. And then we want to move to a place of forgiveness, right? And we forgive people for ourselves.
Mhm.
We don't forgive people for them. They may find value in that forgiveness, but that's not your concern. They may
Mhm.
not find value in that forgiveness, and that's also not your concern. We forgive people for ourselves, and that is going to give us a much greater sense of peace. We need to
Mhm.
do that for every single issue. There got to a point where I was like, let me think of everyone I've never forgiven. And then the next step, which people don't always take, is all the people that you need to forgive you.
Mm,
Sometimes you have done things to other people, because I promise if someone has done something to you, it
yeah.
is 100% true that you have done something to other people. And so then you start this
Mhm.
process of asking forgiveness. And you can write the letter and choose to send that letter or not. So you don't
Mhm.
actually need to go to the person and tell them you ask for their forgiveness. That can sometimes be tricky, especially if you're not sure if they're going to forgive you, but you can write it in a heartfelt way so that the universe knows, their soul knows that you
Mm,
have extended your apology. And then the third step that I think can really help, that costs no money, is to forgive yourself.
mhm.
And I think that's usually the most important part. We harbor so much anger with ourselves that we oftentimes are unaware of. And so we want to start this deep peeling back of the layers of all the places you're upset with yourself, where you dated a guy too long, or you stayed at a job with a terrible boss for too long, or you didn't get a great grade because you didn't study, whatever it is that you have not decided to forgive yourself for, you take
Mhm.
that step. And when we do those three things across the timeline of our life, and you don't have to do it in a day, just commit to do it consistently, you're
Mhm.
going to see that you just lower
Mhm.
the level of fight or flight you're at.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. And I love all three of those things. I have so many journals from years ago that was so helpful for me to, like I said, to relieve the mental valve of all the things I was holding and churning around in my head. I've written several letters to people and
Mhm.
to myself. It really is almost magical that it does help. You don't have to be a writer. You're just releasing all
Yeah.
this on paper or your tablet and you're freeing yourself. I think that's the main thing.
That's all emotional resilience is, right? It's just detaching
Mhm.
from that event. I think we almost don't want to be writers because it need not be performative. You don't need to even be able to read it. If it's
Right.
chicken scratch, it can feel very primal, the process. There should be nothing, it's not like a future poem book of like,
Right.
dear,
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. I would say that the forgiveness piece, forgiving others and forgiving yourself, for me personally,
Yeah.
because I feel like when you forgive yourself and you can see,
Yeah.
all the things, then it makes it easier for me to even want to forgive another person
I
because it's just,
love that. Yeah. I definitely thinking
um,
forgiving ourselves is the most important part.
yeah.
I just sometimes feel like people don't even realize how much they're holding again, like for themselves. And they oftentimes ruminate about
Hmm.
how they feel about other people. Sometimes
Right.
it's easier to access that information,
Sure,
but I
sure.
do agree that from an unpacking perspective and the quality of impact that it'll have, like
Mm,
forgiving yourself is like the most important step. Just like we said, having grace with yourself is the most important step. Pay dividends, but they're also valuable. I
mm,
tell people it's like exercise. When people are like, I was an athlete, so they're always like, well, what should I do to stay in shape? And I'm like, whatever you're gonna do consistently.
that part.
You can do Zumba or you can do power weightlifting. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter as long as you keep doing it. Doing either
Hmm.
one of them once won't help.
Right.
So it's the same with self-care and
Yeah.
moving away from burnout.
Yeah. Wow, this has been amazing. I love that you've broken it down into these four areas and it's easy to remember and give yourself this tool. It's really a tool that people can use. So, what would you say to a person who has come to you raw? They're like, I'm a mess. What would you say in terms of encouragement and empowerment? Something to empower them because oftentimes when I hear about empowerment, it's like we want to empower people. Well, no, I think we can equip them to empower themselves
Yeah.
because they have the most control over their lives. So, what would you say to a person who's come to you? They're really raw, but they really want change. They don't really know what's the first step. What would you say to that woman?
I would remind her of just how amazing she was. And then I always start with this process where I have people remind themselves. So I ask almost every new client right out the gates to I'm going to set a timer. I just want you to write 100 things you love about yourself. In
Mm.
5, it can be that I make the best chocolate cookies in the world. It
Yeah.
can be that I'm always on time for my friends, whatever it is. But I want people to have this constant reminder of just how amazing they are. We tend to
Mm.
focus on, like you said, she comes to me and says, I'm a mess, right?
Mhm.
We're going to learn to talk to ourselves differently. We're going to learn that the world can only love us as much as we love ourselves. So
Mhm.
that first step, deeply loving ourselves, is the most important thing you can ever do. It teaches the world how to treat you.
Absolutely. I love that. I just wrote about that recently, like last week, that you can't expect a 5-star treatment from other people if you're giving yourself the bare minimum. It's so important. And I'm so thankful that's the first step with your clients because we really need to be reminded of how amazing we are. We can love ourselves better. And it takes time to get to that fullness of falling in love with yourself, but that's a wonderful start.
Yeah. And I think to your point of what you wrote about last week is we oftentimes expect other people to treat us better than we treat ourselves. And that just doesn't work.
Doesn't work at all.
And you realize that the anger you feel about the mistreatment is actually directed at yourself. You are sad that you don't treat yourself better and that
Mm-mm.
other people are emulating that.
Because they're just mirrors.
They're just mirroring. I tell people all the time when I had these beliefs about how bad Black people were treated, I felt like I got treated crazy all the time because I was like attracting those bad actors. Now, those bad actors have not disappeared from the world, they are still out there, right?
Hmm.
But the way that I still do cross paths with them at times, but they no longer impact my life journey,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? We teach the world what we're available for.
Yes. This has been amazing. I would love for you to tell us where we can find you online and how people can connect with you.
I love that. You can find me at Brandy B Hudson everywhere. That's my website, Substack, LinkedIn, Instagram, and it's Brandy with an I. I do have a Substack that goes out every Tuesday if you want to follow along, where I just give some life lessons. And every other Thursday, I do a single podcast that's question and answer. If anyone has any questions for me, you can always submit those on our website and I'll answer those questions. It's called The Happiest Life.
I love that. The happiest life. Yes. So we're going to have all of the links in the description below. I hope that you'll connect with Brandy, go to her website, go to her Substack and subscribe, and that you will think about how you're going to love yourself more because this is foundational to radical self-care and transforming your burnout into bliss. So thank you again, Brandy, for being on our podcast today. Thank you so much for your wisdom and for just sharing your raw, real self with us. We're delighted in having you here.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been my pleasure. Appreciate you.
Yes, excellent. And until next time, I hope that you will go out and you will make a decision that you're going to create your big, beautiful life, as Brandy says, and that you will do the work. It does take some work to get it done. You'll like, you'll subscribe, and you'll share this episode with your friends, those who really need a good dose of self-care. And we'll talk to you again next time.